You're listening to 3, the podcast. Hello and welcome to 3, a podcast where 3 filmmakers get together to discuss movies.
Join us as we dive in to figure out how these movies work and what they can teach us about the art of filmmaking.
Whether you are a filmmaker yourself or you just love to nerd out on the art of cinema, we invite you to take this journey with us. This is a film discussion by filmmakers.
Hello. Today we're discussing the 2017 movie The Square, written and directed by Ruben Östlund. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Just a friendly reminder, if you haven't seen this movie, pause the podcast right now, go watch it, and then come running right back, because this podcast is loaded with spoilers. All right, let's get into it. On 3.
All right, Caleb, so you picked the movie this week.
Yeah, I picked The Square for this week by the director. What's the director's name? I don't have it in front of me.
Ruben Östlund.
I picked this film not because I knew I was going to like it or anything like that. A friend recommended it to me, and I was like, oh, that's one that's passed me by a few times. I've been meaning to watch. And I think a film discussion with movies that are a little bit more bold might have a bit of a more interesting flavor when we all talk about them. I think this movie will be a bit polarizing between us, and I'm excited to see what you guys think. And also excited to be able to process what I even think. The movie's a bit out there, a bit wild, and I think I need a bit of help just talking it through, trying to figure out what the point of it was, who it was for, and yeah. Does anyone have the synopsis of the movie in front of them?
I do.
Okay, hit us with it, Jason.
All right, cool. So Christian is a respected curator of a contemporary art museum, a divorced but devoted father of 2 who drives an electric car and supports good causes. His next show is The Square, an installation which invites passersby to altruism, reminding them of their roles as responsible fellow human beings, but sometimes it's difficult to live up to your own ideals. Christian's foolish response to the theft of his phone drags him into shameful situations. Meanwhile, the museum's PR agency has created an unexpected campaign for The Square. The response is overblown and sends Christian as well as the museum into an existential crisis. Dun, dun, dun.
That is a crazy, that's not a log, that's the entire movie. I guess that's what a synopsis is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very discussable film, that's for sure.
Disgustable?
Disgustable.
Disgustable.
All right, Jason, get it off your chest. I'm going to ask you first.
I hate
Jason,
this movie. I hated this movie.
Yeah.
I have
Go on.
a severe allergic reaction to this movie. I started watching it and I'm like, man, I really want to like this. It's Swedish, right? And I like Swedish people, so why didn't I like the Swedish film? It was so out there. I mean, it was about the curator of a museum. I love museums. I love the architecture of modern art galleries. I like the setting. But the story was nowhere. Random scenes put together. The only way that I could describe it is this is the Swedish version of Tree of Life. Devoid of any palatable story. So this is...
Oh, you're really pissing me off.
All these... all you young filmmakers are like, Terrence Malick is the best thing ever. He was in his earlier years, and I think now has returned back to his good roots of storytelling. However, this was a mess. I feel as a storytelling apparatus, this movie sucked.
All right, Bill.
All right, well, this movie seriously bothered me. I think my first impressions are best summarized in my wife's reaction because I watched it with her.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie ended and she was stormed out of the room, throwing her hands up in the air and said, "Just tell me what it means," and left. And I was like, yeah, you are absolutely right. So I felt like it was just a lot of pretentious, trying to say a lot of things, trying to be smart in what it was saying. But in the end, it just didn't do it for me. It was kind of all over the place, I felt. Yeah, it's a no for me.
A no.
Yeah, but upon reflecting and thinking about it, there's some good things I pulled out of it, and I'd like to talk about those as we get into it. But yeah, the overall, I gotta say, 1 star from me.
1 star. That's crazy.
A strong one
Do
star.
Can I give my star rating as well?
Yeah, this is the before discussion star.
Pre-discussion, this is like 0.5 stars for me.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
this is
insane.
like The Square, Jiggly.
What's jiggly?
It's like a really bad Ben Affleck movie. It was made fun of for years. It's voted like one of the worst movies of all time.
I guess we weren't born yet, Will. Kind of before our time.
Yeah. I remember seeing it on video store shelves growing up, and I always thought it was pronounced giggly.
We should watch it for the next one. All right, I think I'd give this movie a 4 out of 5.
Wow.
I knew it. This is
Well,
right up
I
his
actually
alley.
don't know for sure if I give it a 4 out of 5. I'm hesitant.
Mm-hmm.
So this
Yeah.
might be an example where you guys can persuade me the other way. I just finished this movie 15 minutes ago. So I'm just coming out of it. I wasn't expecting it to be a comedy. And to me, I was laughing out loud so many times through this movie. Maybe it's because of the interactions I've had at art galleries or in more pretentious circles.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was pretentious, but it was also a commentary on that subculture. So just to slough it off as, oh, it's pretentious, it's random. How else would you make a film about the ridiculous upper high society, insane amounts of money, art critic world without it being a little bit like that? Do you know what I mean? This wasn't about the artists themselves. It was the people that, like, the culture and the industry and the money making and all the ridiculousness that comes along with art culture. And I just thought there were certain things that were really hilarious. Like in the first or second scene, like taking and removing this amazing stone statue in front of the art gallery, just destroying it, and they're all
That
on
was
their
good.
phones.
That was
And then
definitely good.
just erecting like a square in the middle of the courtyard. I was like, oh, it's just a movie about like what is art, what's acceptable for art, what art should be.
True. And I mean, they have that conversation right in the beginning, that first interview that Christian's in. It's hilarious,
The
actually,
purse?
because
Are you talking about?
Yeah, but she's like, I read this on your website, and she goes into all this jargon about exhibition, and you're like, that didn't make any sense. And he's like, yeah, we were just asking the question, if you put a purse inside a museum, does that make it art? And I'm like, okay, yeah. There were good moments like that, but
Did you get the sense though that he was kind of bullshitting his way through that description? Because when she read exactly what he had written from their website, he looked completely confused, and he actually had to ask for the
absolutely.
interviewer's papers to read what he had written, and
Yeah.
then he tries to explain it. So I think this, like, that part of the story, which is like what one of the first scenes or second scenes is, him kind of like, what did I write? Like, because that doesn't make any sense. It seems artsy, but
Like
it
art
doesn't make
speak.
it-
Art
Yeah.
speak is the most frustrating thing ever. And I love them making fun of it. Like that
Yeah.
whole culture, that world, just portraying that super rich, like children. Like he's giving the speech, and there's that scene where they all run away to eat too quickly. That's so like childish. I mean, I wouldn't stand behind, like, I don't know why it
Yeah.
was the length that it was. I don't know why it was so long, and there were certain scenes that didn't need to be there. But I think there are certain things packed into it. From a story perspective, he was a character who did develop and change. It was a commentary on society a little bit, I think. So I think you guys just didn't like it because of its randomness. Is that why?
No, I think the story was too preachy on the nose, saying like, see, pretension breeds pretension. Like it just seemed like the characters weren't informing the story. It was like the story, the characters were only there to prove a point. And I think that that's kind of like a cheap way of storytelling. Even the scenes, I see how they all fit together, right? So I can kind of see the loose storyline, but it seems like it's there to cultivate the director or writers. Actually, in this case, the director and writers the same, is to basically promote an agenda, which kind of works because it is like a piece of art on a wall, and I'm going to put my agenda right up there. But I don't think that that's necessarily storytelling at its finest. I think tell the story and let the audience make an opinion of themselves, but this guy's just preaching the entire time. See the hypocrisy
Which I think is
of the elite?
No,
you know, like,
I think it was more self-aware than that.
No, okay, it was really on the nose, but I think the director didn't know how on the nose it was, and he was trying to be so smart with it, and that was my biggest problem.
No.
Like, the theme in the end was so simple. It was literally as simple as a square and the message within the square, and he took it and went, oh, figure this out. You get to the end and you're like, back to that simple square, and you're like, wait, why did I just go through all that to come back to this simple message
all
of the
right,
square?
come on, Caleb.
To entertain you.
All of us grew up as church boys, all right? We all sat in those church pews, and there was always that preacher that would come in, and he would just oversell his one point. That one point at the very end, it was a come to Jesus speech, and you knew that the entire time you're like sitting there like, why do I feel so guilty? You know, like I felt like he was full force preaching at me the entire time.
Mm-hmm. The whole time.
Televangelist, nonstop. Reach out to the screen and give me your money.
I think the discussions with the marketing team, they're talking about the square and how to promote the square and get people to engage with it. And when I started thinking about, okay, if they were talking about this actual movie as if that was the director's thesis, they were the funniest characters in it because they wanted to, the square itself wasn't good enough. If it was just too artsy, people wouldn't want to see it. They wouldn't want to come see it. So they wanted to add drama to it. So I was wondering throughout it if all that extra drama was a layer of, how do you know how to say this? I feel like I'm one of the fucking characters right now.
You're having an existential crisis.
But like in the movie, the square itself wasn't good enough.
Sure.
The thesis was too simple and idealistic. And that was the problem with the square as an art piece. And you guys are saying this entire movie isn't good enough because it was too simple and idealistic and it was preaching at you. I just think that, is that a coincidence?
I don't think, I'm not saying that it was too simple. Like, I thought that there was definitely
You said a preacher hammering home the one point over and over. I mean, if you weren't saying a point of something being too simple.
I think that that's an art, okay?
Okay, so you're saying that preacher was dope? That's what you're saying?
Listen, what I'm trying to say is that
I don't think it was subtle, but I think it was...
Let the man speak.
my problem is it wasn't simple enough. And if you pull everything that's good in the plot out of the movie could be a lot shorter and actually be a really good story. There's a really good story there, and there's a really good way to tell that story. But it goes on these distracted rabbit trails that, and this is something we can get into later, but the gorilla scene, however iconic it is, can be cut from the movie. It does not need to be there at all.
Now,
Wrong.
okay, I do have to say that I was a fan of the gorilla scene.
Oh, I'm a fan of it. It just doesn't need to be in this movie. It needs to be in another movie or like a short film in itself.
Well, let me tell you,
That's it.
take that one scene and you've got the exact same message in one scene. That's a short film. Go win Sundance, Cannes Film Festival. I thought the gorilla scene was brilliant. End of the story. No more movie. It's fine.
You know when everyone thinks everyone else will do something and everyone turns their head from it because they don't want to engage the threat.
Yeah.
I think that is what that scene was doing. It was just showing like how far can an artist take this or how invasive can an artist be, and everyone else took them so long to react. It's painful to watch. I think you're right, Jason. That scene could almost been the entire movie. If the movie didn't make me laugh as much as it did, I thought there were so many funny, clever jokes in it. I haven't watched a movie that's made me laugh in a really long time. And with comedies, I have less riding on them, maybe like arc-wise. I can be more entertained if it's actually making me laugh. And this movie just had some insane scenes that were just so funny about him not wanting to give his condom up or the vacuuming around the dirt piles and sucking a bit of that up. Another movie that tried to critique the art scene was Velvet Buzzsaw. Have you guys seen that movie? It felt like it was someone who didn't participate in that scene trying to critique it. But this movie, those little things I just thought were just too funny. It was clever. Yeah, like the class separation was the theme of the movie, right? That was it, right?
Yeah,
That's
I think you take the message of the square, which I have written down here, is they wanted the square to be a sanctuary of trust and caring. Within it, we all share equal rights and obligations, and I think their goal with the square was to bring the classes together.
Do you guys really think that the director was just trying to make a piece about the difference of classes and trying to make you think, like, feel for the poor? You think that's what his goal was?
No.
What do you think his goal was?
I think he like took his scarf, threw it over his shoulder. And I think he was like, I'm going to be artistic. Gorilla Man, come here. That's what I honestly feel like. It was like a prideful exercise is what it was. Like That's at least it's what it
Why?
feels like. Now, this guy could be totally sincere. I'm just saying that it just feels like this guy like threw the scarf over his shoulder and said, "I'm on set now." Like,
It's true though, because in the last scene proves this, the last image of the movie, because he's saying all this stuff about class, and then he just throws shade onto Hollywood a little bit at the end with the girl with the LA hat, and then she just drops her hat down, and
I
all you
didn't
can
catch
see
that.
is LA,
Mhm.
and you're just like, okay, so now this is about Hollywood, and then you have to go through the whole movie again and be like, okay, the museum's Hollywood,
Oh, I
and you're
missed
trying
that
to like
fully.
figure out what the message means
there's
anymore.
too much stuff. Even like I know the scene where his wallet gets stolen, the pickpocket, that scene just drags on. This girl is screaming bloody murder, and he's hearing voices, and like it's just so weird. And I felt like that again was him trying to up the drama, up the ante for no reason. It should have just been this: someone bumped into him and he was pickpocketed, or that's what he thought. You know what I mean? I know that you have to make it a little bit more for the story, because in the end he was never pickpocketed, right?
I think he was pickpocketed. And just the kid, he pissed off the kid, which is a hilarious
Right.
storyline.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
And that is funny, and that part of that was like part of the plot that I think was the good plot of the movie, 'cause
Okay,
there's
what was the
many
bad plot of the
different plots
movie?
of
Because the way you guys are talking about it is the vibe I get from you, Jason, is a scene is there to communicate information. Once you've communicated that, move on. So the scene with the pickpocket, the point
Not
of a scene.
necessarily.
Well, you're saying he's pretentious because he didn't move on.
Well, I think that he overindulged, right? You can have a little extra
Yeah.
chocolate on your ice cream, but when you like pour that sucker on and it's overflowing in the bowl, you're going a little too hard, right? And that's what I feel like he's doing in that scene. He's overdone it.
Real quick, have you guys seen any of his other movies?
No, I want to watch Force Majeure.
Me neither. I just was curious, just because I'm curious to go watch his other movies now too, because are they as pretentious as this? Is my question.
You guys need to do a bit more work than just say the word pretentious. Just because, like, unpack a pretentious film for me. Would David Lynch be pretentious?
No, not to me.
Why not?
Because he's an artist, okay?
Because he's more respected, or he's like a bigger name?
He takes his resources and makes something beautiful out of them and tells a great story, and he doesn't say, okay, I have this platform, I'm gonna try to pack in all this stuff in it, or
I think
Listen.
most of Lynch's famous movies are lots of random ideas that don't always come together, and scenes where things go on for a lot longer than they need to communicate certain amounts of information. Because I think the discussion at hand today that I'm interested in is kind of what this movie was hinting at. To me, going into this discussion, what's interesting is like what makes art valuable, or what makes a movie valuable. I think there's like different camps, and there's the camp of, okay, just the experience. So I think about in this movie, The Square, the people go in and they experience it, and that's what the value of the square is. And then there's the other camp being like, no, like we have to sell this, we have to add all this extra stuff in to make art valuable. I'm thinking for myself the kind of movies I want to make eventually, and I've been watching lots of David Lynch, and I've been watching lots of movies that I would wonder how they wrote them. Like they seem kind of random or disjointed, but when I'm watching them, I'm engaged and I don't know where it's going, and it doesn't feel predictable. Yeah.
Well,
I wonder what makes it
Just because
a movie
a
valuable or good in terms of like,
Well, listen.
if it can a movie be random? Can it have scenes that go on for too long? Or is the goal just to communicate information effectively? Is that the best? Like you brought up Tree of Life, Jason, and I remember us getting into a huge fight about Tree of Life, where your whole thing and your whole point with Tree of Life is that it's not a good use of resources. That was what I remember. The biggest thing with him was he was wasteful of like talent's time or editor's time, or like they shot for way too long.
My point, and I think that what you're picking up on is, I think that sometimes directors go unchecked. Like with Terrence Malick, he experienced a lot of success, and because of that has the ability to make something like Tree of Life that's like a free of accountability of like a producer saying, hey, you should probably edit that down to an hour and a half rather than having it be a 3.5 hour movie. Or this story element, why are dinosaurs in there? Like I just feel like you sometimes go to this level of being unchecked or without the accountability. So it's not a waste of resources. It's just that there's no one really checking or keeping you accountable to keeping the story the main thing. Elements of the story become the main thing. Like, and by the way, for anyone who's listening, I love Tree of Life as an art piece. Like, it's beautiful and it brings all the feels, you know what I mean? But I don't like it as a narrative story. I think it's so disjointed.
Such an interesting distinction that you make, and that's kind of where my interest lies. Is that distinction? Is that, like, you could say you like it as an art piece, but as a narrative movie, it just didn't meet your narrative movie expectations. Therefore, it's just interesting that those are different things, and I'm trying to process as an artist, where is that line between art and like the expectations of what a narrative film should be. And for me, I think about if I were to make a feature film or if I were to write a film. I mentioned this to Jason on the phone the other day, and I've been trying to unpack it personally. I didn't want to write movies or make features because the formula of them, the whole save the cat idea, for me just made me think that I wasn't cut out to do it. It made me not want to make them. And so me getting back into Criterion, watching some older movies, you know, watching some French New Wave or watching some, you know, even some David Lynch, where the expectations that you have going into a movie, they break them, make me feel like I want to make something.
They break what?
They break the expectations. They break the pacing. They break, for you.
How do you know what the expectations are?
Well, for you saying that scene went on way too long. Why do they draw it out that long? We have an expectation in us of what should be important and what should not be important, and what scenes should have emphasis, which scenes should not. I think we do have it. I'm not saying I know exactly what they are. I'm trying to figure out what those expectations are. But you can feel in a movie when something random comes up and they don't tell you why. It's almost like annoying. So in this movie, she has a chimp. She has a monkey.
Stupid.
I think that's kind of an expectation. Like, if they would have resolved why she has a monkey, I think it would have been, oh, that was a good choice. It needed to be in there because it served the story. I'm just wondering with certain movies if everything doesn't have to serve the story. It's more of an interesting discussion where I'm at personally.
I just think that they were trying to accomplish a ton of random stuff. Do you remember the guy, the older gentleman in the marketing meeting?
With the baby?
With the baby. What did that have to do with the story? It was more like making a point. And by the way, men can be good fathers too.
No, it was more building the world of... I just think that if you did an art movie about that art world and you didn't paint it as like the full picture of the different kinds of random characters that would be there, it would just feel flat, like Velvet Buzzsaw. What characters do need to be in movies? Can movies have a random character that just adds to a scene, adds like a level of, like, a baby being in the room? Is for you, is it like, oh, that's the next generation of pretentious artists, they're trying to comment on that?
No, honestly, like, okay, so there's this phrase, does it ring true to you? Does it feel authentic? And when you are overindulgent as a storyteller, you can tell when somebody is lying to you when they're like talking about the fish that they caught that was like this big. And that's what I feel like this filmmaker is doing to me. He's telling me the fish was this big when really it was this big. You know, like, I feel like as a storyteller, he was overindulgent to the detriment of me believing him as a storyteller.
Like, you mean like the story could have been taking place faster, so he was drawing it out? That's the making the fish too big?
No.
Is that what you're trying to say?
I think that's what you would like me to say, but what I'm saying is I think that he was overindulgent with what was in the scenes, how far the scenes went. Okay, so the character of Anne, after the sex scene, the whole talk about like the condom, like, give me the condom, I'll throw it away for you. And then that went on for so long. And then she like hops away and runs away. It didn't have much to do with the story. It was establishing a character. Like, I just felt like it was overindulgent. I felt like we were there for so long. But that's how I felt for most of the scenes, that every scene like had made its point and made its point again. And by the way, there's this monkey, and then made another point. You know what I mean? It just would go so far, and it didn't ring true to me. It didn't feel authentic.
Authentic to what? Sorry, I don't know what you like. Authentic to? It wasn't a realistic. It wasn't a documentary. It wasn't.
I feel like I was being lied to.
About what?
I feel like I was being lied to by the storyteller.
Lied to about what? What was the lie?
Like, this wouldn't happen.
That doesn't matter.
This wouldn't happen.
Does that matter? Was this movie trying to be just straight true realism?
Well, it was satire, so
for sure satire. So why does it matter if it has to be like? Why does it matter if it's like he was lying to you about like these scenes wouldn't happen? It's a comedy. It's satire. I think to expect that from I don't
Even
know. I just don't
comedy
see why
rings
that's
true,
important.
right? It's funny because it's an outlandish version of something that you can relate with. So I think this filmmaker, I guess overindulgent is probably the word that I could use to describe what I feel like this filmmaker was doing to us in presenting these scenes.
Okay, but overindulgent mean that he just spent too long on scenes. That's your point.
If
He just
you would
had
like
too
to
much
define
in
it
them.
as that.
Like you keep making this point, and I'm like trying to understand your point and build up. Okay, what is the strength of your point? What's the best
The best
version of your
version
argument?
of my argument is that it didn't ring true. And even in comedy, those things ring true, and that's why they're funny.
So I'm just in the process of writing right now, and I'm doing David Lynch's masterclass, and I'm just giving it a shot because I want to give writing another chance, and I want to love writing, and I haven't loved writing. I haven't been interested in writing, and I've been wondering why. And I think that for me, all those ideas of overindulgent or what an artist should be or what a movie should be like, how long scenes should last, took the freedom away from me where I didn't want to write anymore. And so for me, when I watch David Lynch, you watch Twin Peaks, he's important to filmmaking because he was overindulgent in the same way.
I think he was
Like
just
in
being
Twin
true
Peaks,
to
there's a
himself,
character.
though, like Jason was saying.
So it's interesting to make the call that would be David Lynch being true to himself, and this guy would be throwing a scarf over his shoulder.
Because I feel like he's trying to be what he isn't. I think there's something really good there, and there's a way he wanted to present it. It was all over the place. There were times where I was like, this feels like a Coen Brothers movie, but it's not a Coen Brothers movie. Like, Coen Brothers can do that. They've perfected, like, doing these long, drawn-out scenes or awkward, like, plot twists. He was trying to do that, but it just didn't feel authentic. It felt like he was just doing it just because.
Yeah. Listen, I totally get where you're at in your journey as like a writer and as a filmmaker, and why this version of storytelling is attractive. There's cool elements to this movie. Like I'm not gonna lie. Like I think the characters, I thought the marketing team was hilarious. I thought the gorilla scene was amazing. I thought the dude who was cleaning up after everyone had gone home and he accidentally vacuumed up half the gravel from the...
Dude, that's hilarious.
Oh, so funny. Like
Yeah.
I loved elements of this, and especially where you are at trying to break the mold of like the Hollywood structure. I probably would be considered more traditional in that respect, but I also think that it's a broken structure as well. Like, so I'm all for that exploration. That stuff aside, I still feel like for some reason there was a disconnect with this film. I love artsy fartsy stuff. Like I honestly, slow paced movies I absolutely love. But weird movies for the sake of being weird, which is kind of what I felt like it was doing. The pretension was funny because they're talking about the Gallery of Modern Art, but I just feel like that's exactly what this filmmaker was doing. He was taking part in the same pretension that he was commenting on.
Perfect. Isn't that the best way to tell the story? He's making you a participant in modern art by the way he made this film. And so if we went to a modern art gallery together, I have left art shows and you get in the same argument we're having. Like, what is art? What is too far? What is a waste of time? Why did I watch that? Why did I sit through that? He's making you participate in modern art. I'm not saying he is, but that's my thought right now.
It could be like that, where this isn't even Ruben's style of filmmaking, but he's doing it, compromising all that to make a point, which, okay.
I think that's a good point.
If that's true, I would appreciate the movie even more. Maybe it would go into 1.5 or 2 stars.
I can't help but like defend it a little bit and wonder if it's a bit more self-aware, because when the marketing team is talking about the square, it's a similar conversation to what we would have about the movie. And he's like, yeah, the square. And then the movie's called The Square. And it is kind of on the nose, but that's why those scenes were kind of funny to me, because I was thinking like, whoa, they're almost the same discussion that the marketing team would have for this movie or for a movie.
I'm gonna kind of bring it back to the discussion that we had about Honey Boy last week. You said for people that have those life experiences of a father that was struggling, this movie is going to be gold to them. And I think to people who are on this journey of breaking down the norm of storytelling, I think that you're going to relate to this movie in a very different way. I still think overindulgent is probably a fair description for me to continue using, because I don't think that the filmmaker accomplished it or made me believe it. I think he went too far, right? There's like that line of haven't done it enough. And then there's, okay, you crossed the line, you went way too far. And I do believe that it still backs the point of the movie, which is the pretension of like modern art and all that kind of stuff. But still, he lost me. Like at several points in the movie, I was like, I had to take several breaks. Like I took 3 breaks. I never, even in slow films, I do not take breaks. I was struggling to get through because I was like, what's the point? I was getting lost in all these rabbit trails that he was going on, you know? And so I think for me, that's where the overindulgence watered down the story for me. Watered down the point. The disagreement is totally valid. Like, I get what you're saying, and we can disagree.
It just feels like the overindulgent was the story. You're interpreting it 100% accurately. And that's where I'm like, okay, to simply shrug someone off as, oh, pretentious, is a little bit too convenient because the things add up. Like what it was about, how they did it, the way the scenes were written, the way it felt, the world was about. It just felt, it wasn't an accident, and that's all I would say. That's why I think I'm going a little bit. My
problem is because we, as 3 long-term filmmakers, got the pretension, but quite honestly, I didn't care about the pretension. I didn't care. I didn't care about this movie at all. He went too far that I missed. I nearly missed the point. In the end, I had to go. You know, honestly, reading the description brought a lot more understanding of the movie for me.
I actually wrote a film essay for the first time since film school on this movie just because I felt like I needed to work through it. And I found little bits of the story structure that I did like in the story that I would have liked to seen.
But unpack that a little bit, Bill, because I want to hear like what were the things that you thought worked and the things that you thought didn't work?
Well, I think the story was simply about Christian trying to learn the square's meaning. He was trying to create a world of trust and care and equality between upper and lower class. And that was his journey the whole movie. Every distraction he went through, it felt like every obstacle he went through, he was trying to learn that. Like his interactions with that homeless lady, he was trying to be more equal. And you could see him trying and trying. And I actually think he, in the end, learned how to be, like, learned what that meant and what that cost. But there was all these just weird distractions in it that were waves of like taking you out of this journey that he was on and then coming back to it, then taking him out and then coming back to it. He went to the apartment building and he cast blame for his robbery on the whole lower class. Like, I feel like that's what it was trying to say by putting the threat in every single door instead of just trying to knock. Like he said in the end, I should have just went and knocked on the doors, found the exact one person. He learned the cost of that by having this one kid ruin this one kid's life. And in the end, it was too late, unfortunately, for him to fix it. But at least he had one last weird opportunity to like have this relationship with this guy in the lower class and kind of see where he was coming from. And that guy just seemed so soft and genuine, and I loved that. It was just this weird little like conversation.
Oh, with the guy at the end of the apartment?
The guy with the ponytail and the mustache. And I felt like that whole journey that Christian went on was really good. But then there were all these really loud moments of like that scene with the Tourette's guy, the gorilla scene, the way too long sweaty sex scene, and the condom pulling, and it's just like that stuff that had nothing to do with his journey. It was all very drawn out and just like loud, way too loud.
I think that plot with Anne, I don't know the relevance of that other than just further building that this dude was arrogant. But yeah, I think the whole movie was about trust. It was about trust in a society, trust that we'll all, stop an art performance if it's gone too far, or trust that we can like leave our phones, or trust that we won't steal from each other, or that was the thesis, was trust. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that there were certain things that definitely didn't need to be in there.
Yeah.
And that's fair. And so those things that didn't need to be in there made you guys not care about him as a character, not care about the movie. So that's why you would say that they were bad choices. Correct?
Well, it kind of, I think it made me lost along the way and even like digesting the story. So that's probably where I think that it was lost for me. It was definitely like interesting, like the monkey scene where the guy acts like a gorilla the whole time. That was super interesting. And like all the art critics like running for the food before the chef like is finished describing it. And the chef like then suddenly yells really loud, "Hey!" And then everyone stops. And he goes, and there's a sauce. And the sauce is a reduction of, I like, there's definitely some really cool
just
elements.
Real quick?
Yeah.
my observation on that, like, is this chef is like probably the only real artist, like authentic, like he's literally making art that sustains people and they just don't care. They're just leaving and he has to literally yell to get their
That's
attention.
good.
I
I like
I
that.
love that.
Yeah. By the
Yeah,
way,
chefs are definitely underrated artists for sure.
total side note,
Side note.
did anyone, now I might be dating myself here. Has anyone seen the movie Better Off Dead? You guys too
No.
young? Oh
No.
my God. It's a cult classic. But Better Off Dead, there's a paper boy going, I want my $2. I want my $2 the entire film. He even like chases this guy down a ski slope. That's what the little kid in this movie reminded me of. It reminded me of the paper boy in Better Off Dead going, I want my $2. I wish you guys would have seen the movie.
Maybe you could recommend it for a podcast where we all watch a movie and just discuss it. Maybe I don't know if there was only a place.
Maybe in the future.
Jason, what were you were you trying to finish your thought though from before? Did you have anything left?
Sadly, I didn't like Anne's character. I thought that I would. I liked everybody else's character. I love the marketing team. They were just odd and kind of fun to watch. I loved Christian. I thought he was great. And I thought the characters in themselves were really great. And even the whole, when it was wrapping up in the end, talking about the square, I thought that was good. I just think that it didn't sew together for me. So I would probably say I'll lift my star rating from a 0.5 to a 1. The pretension of it actually being the story, I think, makes me appreciate it a little bit more. So I'll lift my
If that's what he was trying to do.
Well, I think he was, I think that he still throws his scarf over his left shoulder, most definitely. But and that's not like, I'm just saying, I feel like it's like super artsy.
No, I get it.
I'm gonna stay at a 1, but I do appreciate it when it's good. But it's just not my style of movie. And Caleb, I think I got a lot out of this discussion with you. Like it.
Yeah.
I think
Hey, I'm not done yet.
I know, but it reminds me of like people who say you got to learn the rules to break them. And I think we all three of us, I think, were trained kind of in that save the cat 3-act structure type of storytelling. You study that for so long and then you realize like all these movies you love don't follow it. I think that it kind of gives you permission to explore and experiment more beyond those structures, and I think that's really good. And that's why we have movies like this.
Did
really.
I not teach you guys the hero's journey? Come on, save the cat.
That too.
It's like a side note.
Hero's journey.
Okay.
Yeah, all that stuff. I just think it's interesting to acknowledge that the filmmaker's tradition is a lot larger than hero's journey, save the cat. Like that, okay, at this scene, then later on in the movie, this will resolve at that time. They're going to leave home, do this. I'm not saying that those movies aren't good. It's just lately I've been on a journey personally that more intrigued to see foreign films or films from different traditions or films from different times where the goal wasn't to follow that. And the goal isn't to follow that. I think we should glean from movies that are a little bit more out there and weirder and then bring those into our own films and wean them back in our own things rather than watching more of the same mundane, classic, perfect story structure movies. Yeah, I think that's the value in these movies is not that we make them the same way, but that we learn from them, but also take the freedom that these movies give you to be like, okay, there can be a random scene. There can be something that doesn't necessarily resolve, that just helps build an emotion. You can catch your audience off guard. You can have, random characters. You totally can, because it's art.
Can we use this to transition into what would be our takeaways to inform our own art? Caleb, you've kind of been touching on it, but
2 takeaways. I think certain movies aren't made to be watched in isolation. I think this movie is a perfect example of if you were watch it by yourself, Netflix, carry on, you could misunderstand it and not get the depth of it. I think that's very similar to the art gallery experience, is that if you go to an art gallery by yourself, it will be one experience. But when I went with friends and you end up getting a debate, it kind of becomes more of a conversation about what art is. Like you talk to anyone about modern art, it's going to piss half the room off. Like, oh, what? Just a square on the ground? Modern art, much like this movie, I'm glad that we had the opportunity to talk about it. I think it's an example of a movie where it's best served, even if it pisses you off, to talk it through with someone. Because there was things that you guys said that I didn't realize. The other takeaway,
I got more out of this discussion than I did from the movie.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. And that could be a critique in itself. The second thing is, I think, is just acknowledging the freedom that we have. I think that sometimes that really gets missed when you're trying to create something, is you get the fear of being too out there. I think often makes people rein their parade in so far that it just becomes a neutered piece, you know? And I think that Honey Boy to me was an example of something that I would say was overindulgent in a different way, but I just wish it had a bit more like, nah, I don't want to compare
Shia LaBeouf overindulgence.
Yeah, I don't want to like just compare these two movies, but I just think that it's good to realize the freedom that we have and pull from more out there things and implement them into our own work. Because I think that will make us make more interesting work or explore the ideas that we have that might not fit into the structure just yet.
Yeah, that's good. Jason, what about you? Takeaways?
I think probably similar to Caleb, like the takeaway is like a different form of storytelling and kind of doing things with broader strokes than just like the formulaic, you know. One of the things that I got so frustrated with when I was a writer early on was I'd pass off stories that were really visually visceral, or where the visual elements told some of the story, and I just felt like I was kind of trained and pushed into a corner to being like super on the nose about everything. So movies like this do kind of expand those horizons. I used to watch a lot of French New Wave when I first came out of film school. It is a good reminder. It's a good reminder of kind of just broadening and expanding your horizons. Anytime I see a movie that I hate, like this movie, I probably could say that I honestly hate, but it's gonna stick with me. Like it's one of those things that I will continue thinking about. So was it a bad thing? No, I don't think it was. I think it's a good thing. When you have such a strong reaction to something, then it's probably good for you to see, you know. So I had a strong reaction to this movie. So mission accomplished by the director and writer. And so I think, yeah, but no joke. Like I can appreciate movies that make me feel something or make me feel a certain way so strongly. That's why I have an appreciation for Lars von Trier films. I never say that I like Lars von Trier films. I say that I have a respect for Lars von Trier films because I feel so passionately in a certain direction after I watch the movie, you know, and then it fades and, you know, I realize that I was shoved into a corner and forced to believe something, you know. I can appreciate movies like this. And so I think, if anything, the takeaway is I actually do need to watch more movies that are breaking the mold.
Yeah, it's
I
always
was
good.
young and idealistic at one point in my life, so.
Yeah, I don't know. It's such a funny, like art is always so polarizing, and I think that movies oftentimes aren't polarizing enough, especially like, you know, American movies lots of times. Like I don't want to overgeneralize the entire,
Here we go.
people making movies
Here we go.
the whole world.
You can.
Canadian movies are worse, dude. Canadian movies are like sad reflections of American movies. So I'm not.
We've run out of maple syrup from the maple trees.
Oh my gosh.
You're making yourself
So bad.
sound bad.
I had to.
I've never had maple syrup from a tree.
There's no beavers at the beaver dam.
Hey, can I just say my takeaways because I want to be a part of this?
Oh fuck! Sorry, I don't know. No, dude.
No,
sorry,
it's all
dude.
good.
We said what we want to say. Like
All right,
I think
see
it's
you guys.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Caleb was being
Maybe next week,
overindulgent.
guys.
yeah, exactly. I've
That's
taken.
all good.
Yeah. What's your takeaways, Will?
I thought the performances were actually really good. I thought Clay's Bangs, I don't know how you say his name, Clay's Bangs, he plays Christian. I thought his performance sold the world of the movie very well. I thought even though Anne's character might have been irrelevant, she had that fierceness that she usually brings to movies. I thought their energy was really good. Obviously, Terry Notary, like the ape guy, you can't deny his performance. I mean, he like was an ape. He's like would have made Andy Serkis proud, you know. I'm sure he did in some way.
He did a phenomenal job as an ape.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was
yeah.
crazy.
I honestly, I was scared during that scene. Like I was as
too.
unsettled as the audience. It's like a scene I'll probably remember forever. I think visually, actually, I learned a little bit because the cinematography wasn't very over the top in any way, but I noticed what really made it good was the locations, and maybe that's just Stockholm, you know, shooting in Stockholm, you just get that.
Yeah, I felt.
But I feel like for a movie about contemporary artists, like every location was just gorgeous and very like modern, like that modern art style. And it kind of like made me remember how important location is to building that world, you know, that you're trying to build.
Yeah.
I loved like the simplicity of, and I felt like this was like kind of the climax of Christian's journey. At first we see like him digging through the garbage, and that I thought those were kind of like a cool sequence and visually stunning, but then like him just sitting in his apartment and that slow dolly up to him as he like gives the video message. Moments like that were where I was like, this movie is doing something really good right here.
Like the spinning going up the stairs. That was pretty
Yeah,
cool
that too I was gonna say too, because they obviously had something about the stairwells like juxtaposing each other. Like his was very cool and dark, and then they showed like the stairwell of like the lower classes apartment. It's funny because they lit that more like warm and bright, which you would think like kind of would be opposite in like traditional storytelling sense.
Right.
But that last shot while he was like kind of climbing up the stairs to get on their level with the family was pretty cool. And it's interesting too that they went up, because if you've seen Parasite, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's like obvious visual metaphors where it's like higher classes up, lower classes down. So he was obviously trying to say something there with that last shot of them all climbing up the stairs, and it was like perfectly smooth spinning following them. I thought that was pretty cool. And that felt like it fit the story so well. It wasn't there just to be cool, you know? Like that feels like a shot you'd see in somebody's short film or like a student short film, and you were just like, man, like they were just trying way too hard with this one.
Yeah.
But I felt like it fit. Like you notice it, but you're like, this fits, you know?
It's interesting that, yeah, it's for an overindulgent film, if we'll call that, because I think that's a fair thing to say, as much as I think it can be too misinterpreted as a little bit too simple. But like, yeah, the cinematography wasn't in the way at all, which is really interesting.
No.
They could have like went
Yeah,
so much harder in that direction, which makes me think that they weren't just trying to make a cool movie, because it was so reserved in the way that they shot it. Like it never ever stood out. Like that one spinning shot was the most out there shot. Maybe there's more that I'm just kind of missing. And what you're saying about locations is super cool. I even love it's like art galleries, and then a 7-Eleven, man. And just like the universal symbol of not necessarily the lower class, but it is a symbol of like, you know, the unhealthy food. It's like it's a lot cheaper. It wasn't just a Stockholm version of a 7-Eleven. I love that they just used 7-Eleven.
Yeah. And it's funny that 7-Eleven particularly felt like it was like under an overpass or something. They never showed it, I don't think, but it always felt like you were kind of cramped under something. That's interesting.
Did you guys like? Was there a point to why there's a few scenes in English with like she's an American journalist in Sweden?
Yeah,
I don't know. It could be just a marketing thing.
Right, but okay. So
Trying to
there's
sell
one
them,
other
make the movie
scene
more
where
American.
he spoke to the homeless man in English.
Yeah, that was so weird.
I didn't understand that, because he's like, stay here. I'm going to look for my daughters, but please keep the bags here. But he's in Sweden, so wouldn't he be speaking to the homeless guy in Swedish? It was like I could understand speaking to the American reporter in English, but then he speaks to a Swedish homeless person.
I wonder, but I also wonder, that was clearly, I think, a Muslim homeless person. I think there's a bit there of their immigration stuff that we would just miss, maybe immigrants or maybe more commonly speak English than speak Swedish there. I think that was kind of one of those things that there were certain things in
Lost in Translation.
Yeah, in Parasite that I'm just not familiar with the dynamics of their culture and their immigration stuff. There were certain elements I missed, but I'm wondering if that's the case. But that was strange to me.
And then the LA hat thing. I just wonder if there was more of a commentary about the US. Like,
yeah, it felt like all of a sudden it was bringing Hollywood into it, and then it really did make me think like, oh yeah, it could have just been US, but you know,
well, it is so true though. Like they
LA.
did bring it in with the cheerleaders. You know what I mean? That's a very American-centric art form that his kids were participating in something seemingly way less pretentious, and he was in. When I was watching, I was like, it's a choice to have cheerleading in it for sure,
it's a choice to bring it in like after he's kind of already learned, you know, he's already had that kind of climax in his journey, and then they all of a sudden are like hitting you in the face with this like cheerleader thing. I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, because cheerleading is definitely something I would never call an art form. just because I watched that cheer show on Netflix and it gave me respect for cheerleading. But before that, I just didn't understand it at all.
I can't believe I watched that show like a month ago because I just needed something to binge. I got sick and I was like, I just needed something to watch.
But it's a great show because it shows you what goes into it, and you get a new appreciation for something that is I would say, a very misunderstood art form. I knew you'd hate it, Jason, and I knew that you wouldn't like it too, Bill.
I had a feeling you'd love it. I think we know each other in some way.
I had a feeling that you would love it too.
But 4 stars is a high
4 stars
rating.
might be a bit on the high side, but I've been getting shit on my letterbox for rating everything 3 stars. So I'm trying to get out there and give some more 4 stars.
Yeah.
And
You know what this has taught me is that during this podcast has taught me that I was so I watch movies so positively. Because I don't usually discuss them as deeply as we do. I don't really critique them as harshly. So I'll just a lot of times just watch them surfacey and just be like, oh, I liked that. And then go on Letterboxd and give it 4 stars. But I always feel bad then. I'm like, wait, 4 stars is high. And then I'm sitting there for days after thinking maybe I should bring that rating down.
It's funny the dilemma of rating movies. It's because it's such a counter. I don't know if this is art and whatever art means, and it's hard to define. Putting on a 5-star rating scale is such a weird experience.
Yeah, and it's so subjective, and that's what I'm learning with this film discussion. Honestly, particularly Caleb, you like it for a reason, and it sounds like a lot of that reason is because of the journey you're on, where you're at right now.
I think so. I think I'm trying to not pigeonhole myself to I don't want to be a person who just likes weird for the sake of weird.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to unpack weird as a tool within filmmaking, not just shrug it off.
I think that's great. I think that you are definitely on a journey, and all of your arguments point to that. So, by the way, in our discussions, I don't think that you're I'm defending this guy because it's, a relevant message that needs to be told. I think that you're basically kind of exploring the method, or at least a anti-method. Doing something that's a little bit against the grain, and I fully appreciate that. You have to go through that as an artist yourself, So
I totally relate to in a way because I feel like lately I've been trying to work through Tarkovsky's movies and trying to find an appreciation for them because I had never really watched them since I became a filmmaker and started watching movies more deeply. I've been trying to like them as much as everyone else does, but I'm man, these are slow burners.
Yeah.
And I feel I need to maybe sit with them a while, but
it's funny, films that have a certain staying power seem to lean a certain direction. And there's so many movies that come out every year, and if you went to your list from 3 years ago, movies oh, that was pretty good, they just don't stick with you. And that's kind of, if you get on Criterion or you watch old pics of movies that have had some staying power, there's a common thread of bravery that the director takes that I think is lacking in lots of other movies that are good and they don't piss you off. They don't rub you the wrong way, but they just don't stick around. With you, Jason, do you feel your features, I wouldn't say have much weird in them? Beyond okay, Will likes this movie, I like this movie, Jason likes this kind of movie. I'm kind of okay, sure, we can like movies a certain way, but I feel this podcast is more about what we do with the movies we like or don't like.
I think there's not a whole lot of weird in my films a lot of times because first of all, budgetary restraints as far as what people will actually get behind, the community of people that I have funding these films, so that's a part of it. I think that there's an element of my films that I normalize weird. My first film is about a guy who has a delusional umbrella that the world disappears when he's under it. And then my goal as a filmmaker is to try to get the audience to forget that that's weird. And my latest movie, Out of the Woods, this guy is in the woods. He doesn't know how he got there. He doesn't know where he's at. He just wants to get back to his family, So there's always an element of slight fantasy in the stuff that I do, which I like. But and probably budgetary reasons, I love a passive protagonist. I know that's the worst thing in the world as far as writers are concerned, but starting out, honestly, you have to answer to people, and right now it's kind of been the job has required a certain structure of storytelling. And so if I had the funds, if I had the investment right now to make something, it'd probably be a little bit more off the wall than it would my normal form of storytelling. But because I do appreciate movies that are a little on the outside. You can kind of see those elements of storytelling that I try to take the absurd and make them normal. And I've done that even in my short films as well. Yeah, so I think that I'd probably cultivate that if, I had more of a budget and a larger audience and investment in my back pocket,
It's such an interesting truth that is so irritating about feature films and just like the financial side of it. And this movie does hint on that for sure. Not to bring it back to the movie, but like the opening scene is just, what's the hardest part about running your art museum? He's like, oh, just like the money. It's like it's really hard, really expensive to do it, how you'd want to do it.
Yeah.
And thus the marketing team is there out of necessity to get more people there. It's for the money side of it. It just sucks when you're talking about features because like, I just wish it was the other way. For your first stuff that you make, you could just make whatever you want to make. And then hopefully you will attract the people that would give you the money to, just fully do that. But I know in reality, it's not always the case. But hearing you say that just makes me want, it's such a weird thing. I don't know how you would ever break out of that. It's just the same problem I had the past 5 years, sinking 50 hours a week into corporate video, where the more I made of a certain thing, the more I made of that thing. And me at a weird stage in my life of being like, okay, I gotta, make something that could just flop fully if I want to ever attract the people that could get me money to make things that are more out there. So I don't know how even this movie, how the hell does this get funded? There must be an audience or people that will fund things.
That's also why I was curious about his past films. Like, there's obviously something in his past films that has qualified him to receive the funding, or I've noticed like with someone like Damien Chazelle. I mean, he comes out of film school, he makes Whiplash, and then he makes his first 3 features were in the Academy Awards.
No, that's not true. He made like 2 or 3 features before Whiplash. His marketing team actually got rid of the other 2 features.
Oh, okay. So, but either way, he's like literally, I think he's younger than me, and he's had 3 movies like in the Academy Awards, and I'm just like, that's just connections. Like, it's gotta be like you come out of film school and you just know the right people, or your family knows the right people or something.
Yeah, the second I start thinking about it, like there's a way to make it in a way that it works, you get depressed real quick. Because even, what's his name, Burning Kane, fresh out of high school or fresh out of film school, and he won Cannes last year and shot it and won Best Cinematography, and the kid's 19 years old. So it's just like, those stories to me, I think have proven to be less helpful than helpful. I don't know. I don't know what to do with those stories. There's anomalies. I truly think that way more films go nowhere.
Yeah, it might not even be fair to call it like they have natural talent as much as like it's an anomaly, because I think if you look at it like, oh, these guys are like born to do it and I must not be, it's like you could easily just quit.
Well, yeah, and that's like what we're preached. That's totally what we're told as filmmakers. Is like certain people, like that was like where it started with like Scorsese and all those guys, because they were like kids, and then they were like I don't know. I think the film world's so much different now.
Should we move to what the next movie of the week's going to be?
Yes, let's do it. So I'm picking the movie for next week, and I have decided upon Mother by Darren Aronofsky.
Okay.
So it's Mother !
Have you seen that?
How would you pronounce that?
Mother! Mother!
Caleb?
Mommy?
We'll discuss it next week, so we'll probably have an outro, but if we don't, then I'll just say, hey, join us next week for the discussion of Mother by Darren Aronofsky.
Thanks for joining us on 3 the Podcast. Make sure you subscribe and join us next week for another film discussion hosted by Jason Solari, William Somero, and Caleb Ford.